Okay, so now what I'd like to do is I'd like to power on my Windows 7 machine. And I want to go through the same process again on Windows by using Nmap. And then I want to show you some other tools that I find useful. So I'm just going to open up my Windows machine here. It's going to go full screen. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to want to attach to a CD in the data store. So I'm going to go over to my CD here. Currently I'm not attached to anything, so I'm going to connect to an ISO image on a data store. Within the tools, there is an ISO image called port scan. So I'm just going to attach to that port scan. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take Nmap here and I'm just going to drag that out. And I'm just going to run the Nmap installer. So Nmap was originally created for Linux and was ported over to Windows. So this user interface will look almost identical. So I'm just going to say OK. I'm going to agree to everything. I'm just taking the defaults. I'm installing whatever it tells me to. There's no magical toolbars that it's going to install for me. So I'm just going to go through and install, and I get a little icon on my desktop. So at this point, I've just installed ZenMap. I also have an icon here. So I'm just going to launch the ZenMap scanner. And this looks exactly like what we saw before. So if I typed in that 10.7.66.35 was my IP address, and I'm just going to click on the scan button, and it's going through and it's doing an intense scan. So I can see that this is kind of pulsing, so I can see it discovered the ports that are currently open. And all I'm going to do is just let this thing scan. Okay, so it has completed its port scan, and I can see that it detected the ports, it detected the services that are currently running on those ports. So what I'm going to want to do here is I'm going to want to grab a screenshot of this. So I'm just going to resize this and do a screenshot. I'm going to open up my Word. I'm just going to paste that in here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close this down at this point. And what I want to do is I'm going to open up that folder again. And I want to use a tool called Fiddler. I just kind of want to demo how Fiddler works. It's a different type of sniffing tool. Previously we used Wireshark, which would really do everything that Fiddler does, but Fiddler really is built so that way it deals with HTTP sniffing. Instead of just sniffing anything, it just really focuses on the HTTP protocol. So in order to run Fiddler, I need to first install the .NET framework. This was written using a C# programming language. So I'm just going to go ahead and double click on the .NET full install. And I'm just going to let this install the .NET framework for me. Just going to agree, and I'm going to take the defaults. Okay, so the .NET installation is now complete. So I'm just going to click on Finish, and now I can go ahead and install Fiddler. So I'm just going to double click on the Fiddler setup, and I'm going to agree. I'm just going to install it. Yay, it says that it's successful, so that's good. So I'm just going to close this down. So now if I click on my Start button, I'll see Fiddler there. So Fiddler will work with websites, but it'll also work with applications that are using web services. So sometimes you'll run an application that may like call home to see if there's updates or anything may be new with that product. So if that product calls home, you actually can sniff the HTTP traffic that's going out of that application to the mothership and from the mothership back to the application. So this wedges itself in between and acts as a proxy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up a website that I know has a fill-in form here. So I'm just going to go to the website, and I'm just going to fill this fill-in form out. Matter of fact, any website you go to, if you just go to Google, I can see that in here it's actually passing all of the information going to Google and information like that. So for right now, I'm just going to highlight all of this, and I'm just going to hit the delete key so that way we can see some fresh information here. So I'm going to just restore this so that way hopefully I can get both screens on. So down here you'll be able to see. So I'm just going to type in my name. So this application here is written using all JavaScript. So it's using Ajax to send the information back up to the server. So if I were to send the message, it's passing it, and I'm just going to say, oh, and then I see the thank you. Now over here, I can see all of the transmission that happened. So I can see all the different things that were downloaded. So I see I'm using Bootstrap, so I see the themes, the CSS. I see the JavaScript, the HTML5 JavaScript, Facebook images. So the thing that's kind of interesting here is I've got gdforum.php. So if I double click on this, it actually lets me see all of the fields that got filled in and that's being passed over the wire. So if you were a JavaScript developer or even just a web developer and you're trying to maybe pass information from one field to another field, from one web page to another web page, and for some reason that data wasn't passing correctly, this could be a tool that you could use to see, oh, what's being thrown over the wire, and how does that look and how is it being transformed. So I don't know, I just wanted to quickly demo this as a tool. I know that I've used this in the past. It's been a very handy tool to have. So hopefully you find this helpful. You can just install Fiddler. If you hit any web page, it doesn't matter. Just that way you can see that that you were able to get it installed. So I'm just going to grab a screenshot here. Okay, so I'm just going to paste that in. Okay, so I've got a couple screenshots here. So at the bottom of the document, I do have a little write-up. So at the bottom of this document, please write a short paragraph describing the benefits of using these tools in your own system. How would you use these tools within a work environment? So really what I'm looking for is just being able to scan your system so that way you can know what vulnerabilities may exist. Not necessarily vulnerabilities, but potential. It's definitely exposure. So, for example, if I've got a computer sitting in the corner of my house that I'm using as a media server, so really it's just holding a bunch of movies and stuff for my television, and it's exposed to the outside world, that's a danger. It probably shouldn't be. It should be, behind my firewall. But if I port scan it, I can see what services are currently running. So if it's got port 21 open, I may want to say, well, do I ever FTP movies to this server? And if I don't, if I'm like, well, I always use my thumb drive, I would want to probably shut that service down. Or if it's running a web server, does it really need a web server? So I'd shut that down, which would actually make the machine run faster, more efficient, but most importantly would make it more secure. So anyways, hopefully you enjoyed this lab, and I will talk to you soon.